Okay, guys, so let's move to question 6.2. And the question reads as follows. The question says calculate the average gradient of G between A and C. So let's see on the graph. So they want you to calculate the average gradient between A and C. And that will be the average gradient of the graph of G. So it's more like if you were to draw a straight line connecting these 2 points, you'd be having something straight line connecting those 2 points. Then that's an average gradient between these 2 points, which is for the graph of G as I've explained. So this question, let me see, it's allocated 2 marks. So with this kind of questions, guys, that's where you need to score all the marks. And I think it's one of the simplest questions because you're already given the coordinates of those 2 points. So for the fact that the question said calculate the average gradient, what you need to do is then now to write the formula for calculating the gradient. We know mathematically m represents the gradient. So the gradient, it's equals to change in y over change in x. That we know. And obviously, even if you can check on your formula sheet, I think you should be given the formula for calculating the gradient. Let's just quickly check if there is a formula for calculating the gradient. So as you can see, we've got a formula for calculating the gradient, but you should at all times know this formula by heart, that the gradient is the change in y over the change in x. So in simple terms, change simply refers to y2 minus y1. So this is this sign represents change. It's delta in Greek. So it's called delta. It simply means change. So because it's delta y, then it means y2 minus y1 over delta x, which is change in x. So it means it's x2 minus x1. So from this formula, you also realize that you'll obviously need 2 coordinates to be able to calculate the gradient. So we are given the coordinates of A, which is 0 and 5. We also have the coordinates of C, which is 2 and 9. So from here, you just need to decide which values do you take as the second values and which values do you take as the first values. So it's up to you whether to take the coordinates of A as y2, x2. And that will obviously mean the coordinates of C, it's y1 and x1. But for me to be able to easily solve this type of questions, for me, always, alphabetically you start with A, B, and C comes second. So because C comes second, then these coordinates becomes my x2 and x1. And then because letter A comes before letter C, then this becomes my x1 and y1. So I've always been doing I've always been assigning the coordinates following the manner in which, or the order in which the alphabets follow. So I've got A, I've got C. If I had different letters, let's say I had let's say I had D and F. That would mean my D is x1 and y1. Then my F would be x2 and y2. So I know throughout the question, even if I need to refer back to the same coordinates, I always know which ones are my x2, y2, which ones are my x1 and y1. But it doesn't really matter. This was just how I used to assign the coordinates. So you can still do them the other way. You still get the same answer. So now let's proceed to answer this question. So you've got your y2, which is 9 minus y2, y1, which is 5, over x2, which is 2 minus 0. So this is equals to, let's see, 9 minus 5, it's equals to 4 over 2 minus 0, it's equals to 2. So that means the average gradient is equals to 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So let's see if we swapped the y2 and the y1. So that means this is our 5, it's our y2, which is 5 minus 9, which is y1. We've got our x2, which is 0 minus 2, which is equals to 5 minus 9, it's negative 4, over 0 minus 2, it's negative 2. So obviously the negative cancels, and 4 divided by 2, it's equals to 2. Can you see? So it's as simple as it is. You shouldn't be stressing a lot, because the question simply requests you to calculate the average gradient between the two given points. So it's just a matter of you being able to identify the formula to use, and then from there the formula will guide you in terms of knowing which values you need. Then you go back to your graph and check between which 2 points are you calculating your average gradient. So don't be confused by the word average. I'll say it's an average because remember, a parabola from that point to that point, it's actually curving. You see, this is the turning point. This is the turning point of this graph. And from there to there, it's not forming a straight line. It's somehow curving. So you are not actually calculating the gradient of that curve, but instead the gradient between those 2 points. So it becomes an average gradient because you are not really calculating the gradient of that curve, but the average gradient of a straight line. Then we know that averagely from that point to that point, the gradient of the graph is averagely 2. So I think, let me see. Okay, I think this question was actually simple and straightforward. I'm not sure if there's something, because I just noticed that I actually wanted to make, let me see. Okay, I wanted to actually explain this. Remember guys, when you use these 2 points, never ever swap or confuse the x2 with the x1. Let's say for instance, you must make sure not to do this thing, guys. Let's say maybe you say this is your 9 is your y2, then you say 9 minus, obviously your y1 will be 5, and for some reason you forget that you assign 9 to be your y2. Then for some reason you then use 0 as your x2, then you subtract your x1 as 2. Let's see what we get. It's 9 minus 5, which is 4, divided by 0 minus that, it's equals to 2. Then can you see this is negative 2? So what I'm trying to say is make sure when you use your 9s y2, remember this automatically becomes your x2. So it's always best to just write them down to say if you are assigning the coordinates of C as your second values, then just write at the top there to say this is your y2, this is your x2. Then for the coordinates of A is x1 and y1. So it's always best to write somewhere at the top or somewhere at the bottom so that you don't forget. So that's why I'm saying in my case, even if I'm right, let's say for instance this was the last question and it was one of those simplest questions where I need to just quickly answer the questions, because I always know that A comes first. This is the letter alphabetically that comes first, so these are my first values. Then C comes after A, then these are my second values. So I'll always know in my mind that these are my second values. So I'll always use 9 as y2, and then I know this then automatically becomes my x2. So just write 9, and then in the bottom 2, I know the top it's 1 1. So I think I've just noticed something. So this becomes your x and y2, and this becomes your x and y1. So these are your second values, these are your first values. So what else am I missing? I think that's all for this question. So the most important part is the marking. Remember, this question is allocated 2 marks. So I'll just quickly show you how you mark this type of question. Let me just cross that one so that you don't forget that it's not acceptable to do it that way. So when it comes to the marking part, we are not going to give you a mark for writing down the formula, but instead we'll give you a mark for correct substitution. Why are you not given a mark for the formula? The answer to that question is simple, guys, because I've already shown you where you get that formula. So it's assumed that that formula you got it from the formula sheet. So that's why you're not given a mark for writing that formula. Maybe if you're in grade 10, you're going to get a mark for writing the correct formula, because at that stage I assume they are more interested in understanding how you arrived at the final answer. Take into consideration your initial step, middle steps, and also your final answer. I'm sure at this stage you know where you'll get your second mark, obviously your final answer. So if you did it this way, then you're going to get a mark there. You also get your second mark there. So that's how you score your 2 marks. So guys, as I've said from the previous lessons, that it's not necessarily about just answering the questions, but regardless of how many marks the question has been allocated, I always try by all means to give you guys the tips, and also just somehow include a mini lesson within answering some of the questions, so that in the future, if you come across a similar question, you can still use these tips that we provide in each and every lesson where we answer the questions or solve mathematical questions. You can use the same tips to apply in whatever questions that you will be solving, because obviously you might not be solving exactly the same questions, but in terms of the information, you might find that you need the same information to tackle different questions. So guys, in case if I missed, if I missed something that you wish I explained, you can just comment in the comment section, then I'll address those questions by either creating a special video addressing those questions. Otherwise, I'll just respond on the comment section. So thanks guys. I think we can now move to the third question. I'll just do a separate video for question 6.3.